Welcome to Book on a Shelf. If you're looking for a way to really get under the skin of pivotal moments and texts in American history, well, you're definitely in the right place. We try to give you that shortcut to understanding. And today, we're doing a critical deep dive into something truly extraordinary. And it wasn't even a prepared speech, really. It's Robert F. Kennedy's impromptu remarks from April 4th, 1968. The day Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
That's right. And this address, given off the cuff in Indianapolis, it's often held up as like a masterclass in crisis communication.
Absolutely. Some say it actually saved cities from erupting into widespread riots that night.
It very well might have. So our mission today isn't just to, read the words. We want to really excavate the rhetorical choices RFK made in that moment.
Mhm.
We need to place them right inside the historical tinderbox he was trying to disarm. It's about understanding the mechanics, How does a leader use language on the fly to manage just sheer panic and grease and try to prevent violence when everything feels like it's falling apart?
Yeah, and for you, the listener, the goal here is to pull out some powerful, maybe even actionable insights. How is influential language actually built under almost unimaginable pressure?
Exactly.
We're going to really dig into the sources, look closely at the language, the context, everything, to see why this brief, spontaneous moment, these remarks, remain such a defining chapter in 20th century America.
And how it just demonstrates the incredible power of, measured intentional speech, even when it's improvised in chaos.
Okay, let's get into it, this crucial moment. So to really feel the weight of RFK's words, we first have to immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of April 1968. I mean, the sources, they don't just say the 1960s were turbulent, they paint a picture of a decade under extreme, polarizing pressure.
Oh, absolutely. It was this decade of, you could almost call it manic duality.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you had this incredible soaring idealism, right?
Wow.
The civil rights movement had achieved these landmark victories. You had moments like Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, August 63, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I mean, that was just this huge, visible peak of a movement that truly believed nonviolent change was possible.
Yeah, seemed inevitable even.
Seemed inevitable to many, yes. But running right alongside that hope was this brutal, escalating reality of, violence, political violence, social fragmentation, just tearing the country apart.
And the sources really detail that. The Vietnam War was just consuming the national psyche, wasn't it? Fueling huge anti-war protests, these deep generational divides.
And those divides didn't just stop in the 60s. They kept going, tragically.
Yeah.
We know the pressure cooker environment continued, leading to things like the shootings at Kent State University in May 1970.
Right. 4 students killed during a protest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And domestically, even with the legislative whims, civil rights activists who were organizing lawfully, peacefully, they still faced, and the source uses this phrase, angry and often violent opposition.
Just for exercising their rights.
Precisely. So the overall feeling across the nation wasn't stability. It was this profound sense of unrest, deep conflict that just wasn't being resolved.
And hanging over all of this was the shadow of political assassination. It wasn't just a theoretical fear, was it?
Not at all. The country had already been profoundly shaken by President John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas,
Yeah.
November 22nd, 1963.
His own brother.
His own brother. And that event just shattered any illusion that the highest office, or really any prominent leader pushing for change, was safe.
It made violence seem almost inevitable, predictable even.
And the leaders of the movement felt that very personally. Our sources suggest Dr. King himself may very well have seen his own fate foretold in JFK's assassination.
Especially with the previous attempts on his own life, right?
Exactly. There had been threats, failed attempts. The whole atmosphere seemed to confirm that if you pushed for significant political progress, you were inviting potentially fatal retribution. It wasn't a matter of if tragedy might strike, but almost when. That feeling, it just hung over the movement.
Which brings us right to the immediate prelude, Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King goes there to support striking sanitation workers. They were fighting for, basic dignity, fair wages.
Yeah, a really fundamental struggle. And on April 3rd, he gives his final public address, the now famous I've Been to the Mountaintop speech.
Chillingly prophetic, looking back.
It really is heartbreakingly prophetic. He talks in these sort of abstract biblical terms, about seeing the promised land, but acknowledging, I may not get there with you. It feels like a conscious recognition of the danger he was constantly in.
And then, less than 24 hours later, April 4th, 1968.
He's shot on the balcony of his motel in Memphis, the Lorraine Motel. The news just rips through the country like wildfire, often, through raw rumors, unverified reports adding to the chaos and fear.
And this is exactly the situation, the chaos that Robert F. Kennedy walks into. He's in Indianapolis. He's scheduled to speak at this big outdoor political rally for his presidential campaign.
Yeah, campaign rally. The crowd is gathered, expecting a political speech, high energy, part of the campaign trail.
But the mood was shifting rapidly as the news started to filter through that crowd.
Oh, the scene in Indianapolis was, genuine tinderbox is the right word. Many people there, especially in the predominantly black neighborhood where the rally was held, were hearing about King's assassination piecemeal. Rumors were flying, often exaggerated. Reports of riots already breaking out in other cities were starting to come in.
So the potential for violence right there was huge.
Enormous. RFK's own staff, the police chief, they begged him not to go speak. They told him they couldn't guarantee his safety, that a riot was almost certain if he showed up. The risk was immense.
But he decided to go anyway.
He did. He made that crucial decision. He felt that leadership, especially in a crisis like this, required presence. It required facing the fear, not retreating from it. So the question looming over him as he headed there was terrifyingly simple but profound. How would he handle the news of Dr. King's death with this volatile, grieving, angry crowd?
And what just adds another layer of profound tragedy to this whole moment is the irony that follows, isn't it?
It's almost unbearable. Here, RFK delivers this incredibly powerful, impromptu plea for peace and nonviolence that night.
And it largely worked in Indianapolis. The city remained relatively calm compared to others.
It did. But then, as our sources detail, just 2 months later, June 5th, 1968, Robert Kennedy himself is assassinated, shot at a political rally in Los Angeles, right after winning the California primary.
Struck down by the exact kind of violence he was trying so desperately to talk the nation out of in Indianapolis.
That dual tragedy just cemented 1968 as this year of unbelievable loss and, well, convulsive change for America. But the Indianapolis speech, those few minutes, they really stand as this enduring testament to the power of words in a crisis.
And there's a lasting legacy there, too, right, in Indianapolis itself.
Yes, the sources note that in 1994, the city established a monument, the Landmark for Peace Memorial, right on the spot where RFK spoke. It honors both men, Dr. King and Robert Kennedy, two figures who, despite any political differences, shared this deep, tireless commitment to peace and understanding.
So the actual location became this sort of sacred ground, marking a moment when words really did seem to hold back the tide of despair.
Precisely.
Okay, so that context, the fear, the fragmentation, the assassinations, it's absolutely crucial for understanding just how powerful RFK's opening move was. He lands in this charged atmosphere, a campaign rally, and he has to instantly shift everything.
Right. Forget a slow buildup. He needs to neutralize the campaign energy and pivot immediately to mourning and hopefully unity.
So instead of defining rhetorical terms in the abstract, let's just dive right in and see these tools in action, starting the second he gets that microphone.
Okay, so he arrives, faces this crowd. It's noisy. People are holding campaign signs for him. And he begins, his voice is quite low, almost hesitant at first. He says, "I have some very sad news for all of you." And then he pauses, interrupts himself. "Could you lower those signs, please?"
Ah, that moment right there.
"I have some very sad news for all of you."
That interruption, that very direct, almost quiet command. Could you lower those signs, please? That's pure rhetoric at work, isn't it? Using sentence structure, the syntax, but also powerful symbolism.
Absolutely. It's not just about, getting people to pay attention practically. The analysis we looked at really zeroes in on the symbolism. Those signs, they represent the event itself, the political rally. RFK's own ambition for the presidency.
The reason everyone was there initially.
Exactly. And by asking them to be put away, Kennedy's is instantly signaling, this is not about that now. The immediate political goal is off the table. He's performing this kind of rapid rhetorical triage, creating a non-political space right then and there for crisis communication.
Clearing the air, literally and figuratively. And right after that, he starts using very simple but deliberate language. The word choice, the diction, and specifically repetition. He keeps saying all.
Yes. That repetition of all is so important. Sad news for all of you. He talks about Dr. King's dedication to justice between fellow human beings. He mentions people who love peace all over the world. It seems simple, but it's incredibly calculated.
What's the effect he's going for there?
In a society that felt like it was fracturing along racial and political lines, he's using language to rhetorically create universality. He's reminding them, subtly, that this isn't just one group's tragedy. This loss impacts everyone. It mirrors the whole point of the civil rights movement: universal rights, shared humanity.
So it immediately lifts the focus away from just his campaign or even just the Black community's grief and frames it as a national, even global moment of loss.
Precisely. It's a unifying device right from the start, designed to ground the moment in a shared human experience.
Okay, so he sets that unified tone. Then he moves very quickly to frame Dr. King's legacy itself. And the words he chooses here are incredibly potent. He says, Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort.
Yeah, the sources really highlight the diction there, the choice of love and justice. These aren't just positive words, they are moral absolutes.
They carry immense weight.
Immense weight. They're arguably two of the strongest, most non-negotiable concepts he could have used to define King's entire life's work. By focusing on love and justice, Kennedy instantly elevates King's murder. It's not just a political hit, it becomes a profound moral tragedy.
So it gives King's death this immediate, lasting meaning that resists being framed as just, another violent act in a violent time.
Exactly. It anchors it in these fundamental principles that, ideally, no one could argue against. It prevents the meaning of his death from being immediately hijacked by those pushing for division or revenge.
Which brings us to maybe the riskiest but also most powerful part of the speech. He directly addresses the audience, particularly the Black members of the audience, and acknowledges their rage head on.
Yes, he says, for those of them who are Black, he understands the temptation to be filled with bitterness and with hatred and with a desire for revenge.
That takes guts to name those feelings so directly.
It really does. And this is a masterful use of pathos that appeal to raw emotion. But it's not just acknowledging the emotion. The specific word choice here, the diction, is absolutely crucial for building trust in that moment.
How so?
Well, the analysis points specifically to his use of the word hatred. Why that word? Why not something slightly more formal like animosity or contempt?
Hatred feels more visceral, maybe, more primal.
Exactly. The source describes it as a more familiar, more primitive word.
Yeah.
Everyone understands hatred on a gut level. By using that raw, familiar word, Kennedy avoids sounding like some detached academic or politician talking down to them.
He's meeting them where they are, emotionally.
Precisely. He's acknowledging the legitimacy and the depth of their raw, understandable rage. He's saying, I see it, I get it, and that act of validation is the key. It earns him the moral authority, the credibility, to then gently try and steer them away from acting on that hatred.
But he doesn't just acknowledge their rage. He immediately connects it to his own experience. This is where the ethos comes in so powerfully, right? His credibility.
This is arguably the absolute core of the speech's persuasive power. He says, for those of you who are Black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed.
Just lays it bare. The assassination of his brother, the president.
Right there. He draws this direct, incredibly painful parallel between their potential reaction to King's death and his own reaction to his brother's death. He's not just saying, I understand. He's saying, I know this specific feeling. I have lived this.
It's an unbelievable act of vulnerability, but also strategic connection.
Totally. He validates their anger not by condoning violence, but by sharing his own identical wound. It establishes this instant, almost unshakable ethos. He's not a politician trying to calm them down. He's a fellow sufferer who has walked this exact path of grief born from political violence.
And the impact of that must have been immense. It shifts the dynamic, doesn't it? It's no longer politician addressing angry crowd. It's one grieving person speaking to others.
Exactly. It reframes the conflict. It's not Black versus white or potential rioters versus the establishment. It suddenly becomes us people united by shared suffering, people who understand loss against them, the forces of hatred and violence that inflict such pain.
And structurally, he reinforces that us feeling throughout the speech, too, doesn't he?
Yes, absolutely. The consistent use of the pronoun we is crucial. We have to make an effort, what we need. It's used constantly. It's deliberately chosen to unify everyone listening, to build support for this collective venture he's proposing, the venture of getting through this terrible time together, constructively.
Okay, so he's acknowledged the rage, connected through shared tragedy. Now he needs to channel that energy away from immediate payback towards something else.
Right, towards a path forward. And he defines that path using very targeted repetition again, outlining the necessary effort involved. He insists, but we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond, or go beyond these rather difficult times.
That repetition of make an effort, what's the analysis say about that?
The analysis highlights that it serves a really key purpose. It subtly communicates that overcoming prejudice, overcoming this deep grief and division, it's not going to be easy. It won't happen overnight. It requires sustained, conscious work.
So it manages expectations. It's not promising a quick fix.
Exactly. But by framing it as an effort that we can make, he also keeps hope alive. He implies it's difficult, yes, but possible. And think about the audience's state. They're shocked, angry, maybe panicking. Their ability to process complex ideas is low. Simple, rhythmic repetition of a core concept like make an effort is actually a very effective way to cut through that noise and embed a central message.
Keep it simple, make it memorable.
Make it memorable, make it actionable, even if the action is internal commitment at first.
And then, right after calling for effort, he makes this really quite startling rhetorical shift. He pulls out a quote from ancient Greek tragedy.
Yeah, this is fascinating. He quotes a line he attributes to the playwright Aeschylus. Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God.
Now, wait a minute. You're in this inner city neighborhood, you've just heard MLK has been murdered, emotions are sky high, and a politician starts quoting ancient Greek poetry. Doesn't that risk sounding totally out of touch, academic, even patronizing?
That's a really fair question, and it's something scholars debate. It could have landed badly. But the analysis suggests a couple of reasons why it likely worked in this specific context. Firstly, RFK was known to carry and read the Greek tragedies.
Hmm.
This wasn't just plucked out of thin air. It was likely meaningful to him personally, which might have lent sincerity.
Okay, so authenticity helps.
Definitely. But more strategically, the sources suggest he chose this specific line because it performs a crucial register shift. It fundamentally changes the time frame of the tragedy.
What do you mean?
Instead of keeping the focus locked on the immediate horror, the gunshot, the fresh grief, the potential for riots tonight, the, quote, lifts the experience and places it within this vast, almost timeless philosophical framework. It says, essentially, this kind of deep suffering, it's part of the human condition. It's ancient.
Right.
And while it's terrible, it's a process that eventually leads to wisdom.
So it reframes the pain. It's not just meaningless suffering. It's part of a longer, maybe even necessary journey towards understanding or growth.
Exactly. The goal shifts from immediate reaction, maybe revenge, to this idea of patient, painful transformation over time. And the analysis suggests this had a profound, almost liturgical calming effect. It subtly tells the audience, your despair, as awful as it feels right now, isn't a dead end. It's a stage. It's part of a process that can lead somewhere meaningful.
So it encourages them to look beyond the immediate crisis, towards a longer view, anchored maybe not in politics, but in something deeper, like that phrase, awful grace of God, suggests.
Precisely. It transforms immediate despair into a kind of long-term, difficult wisdom. It's a really sophisticated rhetorical move dropped into an incredibly volatile situation.
Okay, so he's unified them, acknowledged their rage, shared his own grief, put the tragedy in this larger context. Now he needs to really clearly define the choice ahead, the path forward versus the path of destruction.
And he does this using incredibly powerful contrast and parallelism. This next section is just a masterclass in structuring a message for clarity and impact, especially for an audience under stress.
Let's hear it.
He lays it out rhythmically. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
Wow, the structure there is so clear. It's almost like a chant.
It really is. That parallel structure, what we need is not X, what we need is not Y. It systematically contrasts the negative path, division, hatred, violence, with the positive desired path, love, wisdom, compassion. It uses antithesis, putting opposites side by side for maximum effect.
And that rhythm, repeating what we need in the United States, it drills the message home, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's highly effective because it's so easy to follow even if you're distraught. It gives the crowd an immediate positive alternative to the destructive impulses they might be feeling. He's essentially saying, I know what you might want to do out of grief and anger, but here's the clear moral framework for what we must do instead.
And he connects that positive framework back to King's mission too, right?
Yes, he concludes that section by focusing on the need for justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. So the solution, the path forward, is explicitly made universal again. It's not about factional interests, it's about justice for everyone.
Okay, so as he's moving towards wrapping up, how does he seal the deal, so to speak? How does he close this incredibly delicate address?
He relies heavily on pathos, again, that emotional connection, but shifts it towards immediate constructive actions and future goals. First, he asks the audience to go home and say a prayer for the family of Martin Luther King.
Which is a direct appeal to empathy and, for many, their religious beliefs.
Exactly, a very human, relatable request. But then, the sources note, he says, more importantly, ask them to say a prayer for our own country, which all of us love.
Ah, that's a powerful pivot. From personal grief to national identity.
Extremely powerful pathos. That appeal to patriotism, to shared love for the country, is a strong unifying force. And he frames the purpose of that prayer using those key positive words again, understanding and compassion. He's asking them to channel their grief not into destruction, but into a kind of moral, constructive energy for the nation.
Looking forward, not backwards.
Looking forward. Always looking forward.
But he doesn't end on just pure optimism, does he? He seems to inject a dose of realism right at the end.
Yes, and this is crucial for maintaining that hard-won ethos. His credibility as a leader who understands the real world. He uses repetition one last time to drive home this duality of hope and struggle. We will have difficult times. We've had difficult times in the past, he says, but we will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness, and it's not the end of disorder.
That's pretty blunt. He's not selling them a fantasy that everything's suddenly going to be okay.
Not at all. And that political honesty, that realism is vital. He's essentially telling them, look, this terrible event doesn't magically fix everything. The struggle isn't over. Prejudice isn't gone. By acknowledging this difficult truth, he avoids sounding naive or disconnected from their lived reality.
Which, ironically, makes his final hopeful statement more believable, doesn't it?
Vastly more believable. If he had just ended with pure sunshine and rainbows optimism after acknowledging their hatred and his own family's tragedy, it might have rung hollow. That dose of realism keeps him grounded and makes the final pivot to hope feel earned.
Which brings us to that concluding statement. Again, powerful parallelism, lots of positive words.
He finishes with, but the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings that abide in our land.
A powerful, unifying vision to end on.
Extremely. But this is where our source analysis throws in a really complex and I think important observation. While it's a rhetorically brilliant conclusion, the analysis notes that this specific claim that the vast majority of both white and black people in 1968 wanted to live together harmoniously well, it's described as potentially stretching the truth.
Stretching the truth. So wait, are they suggesting he was lying? At the most critical point of the speech.
Well, lying might be too strong a word. It points to this really profound ethical gray area in crisis rhetoric. In 1968, the country was deeply, deeply divided. Racial tensions were incredibly high. Was it factually accurate to claim a vast majority on both sides actively wanted immediate peaceful integration and shared improvement? Probably not, if you looked at polling data or raw sentiment on the ground.
Okay, so if it wasn't strictly factually true, what was he doing? Why end on that note?
This gets to the heart of what leadership language sometimes has to do in a crisis. The argument is that in moments of extreme volatility, a leader's primary responsibility might shift. It might not be just to report the current, messy, dangerous reality, but to articulate the necessary collective aspiration, the ideal vision towards which society must strive if it's going to hold together and avoid immediate catastrophe.
So it's less about describing what is and more about defining what must be.
Exactly. He wasn't necessarily presenting a sociological snapshot of 1968 America. He was articulating a moral mandate. He was painting a picture of the future they needed to believe in and act towards right now to prevent cities from burning down.
So the rhetoric itself becomes a tool to create that reality, or at least make it more possible. By stating that the majority want peace and justice, he empowers the people in that crowd who do feel that way. He gives them permission to believe they're not alone, to hold the line against the voices calling for violence.
Precisely. It's using aspirational language as a catalyst. It defines the ideal path forward and makes the alternative succumbing to division and riot seem like the minority view, the less desirable choice. It's a kind of positive framing, maybe even positive hyperbole, used not necessarily to deceive, but to guide and stabilize.
That's fascinating. It suggests that the calculated use of diction, ethos, pathos, all those tools we've talked about, culminates in this final rhetorical act that prioritizes maybe social cohesion and a future ideal even slightly above the complex, dangerous present reality.
You could argue that yes, the speaker in that situation might need to cast a vision of an achievable peace, perhaps making it seem a little closer or more widely desired than it actually is yet, precisely in order to prevent total breakdown and make that peaceful future more attainable.
Wow. That distinction, rhetoric as just description versus rhetoric as a necessary constructive force shaping the future, that really explains why this speech wasn't just impactful then, but why it's still so crucial for us to study and understand today. So, what we've really unpacked here is this remarkable convergence, isn't it? Robert F. Kennedy, literally standing on the back of a flatbed truck in a potentially explosive situation, drawing on the historical moment, his own personal trauma, and these classical rhetorical techniques, all woven together spontaneously to deliver a message of unity, a message of forward momentum that genuinely seemed to diffuse a crisis.
It truly is a masterclass. It shows how language isn't just talk. It can be a profound tool of governance, of social stability, especially in the worst moments. He took this raw, immediate rage and grief, and through very careful word choice, establishing that undeniable personal credibility, that ethos, and using the structural power of things like parallelism and repetition, he managed to channel it. He transformed it, at least for that audience that night, into a kind of shared commitment to moral effort, however difficult.
So as you, our listeners, reflect on this deep dive, here's something maybe to chew on, a provocative thought building on that last point. If political rhetoric in a crisis, like we saw perhaps in RFK's closing statement, sometimes requires a leader to articulate an ideal, this necessary narrative that might objectively be stretching the truth a bit, what does that tell us? What does that calculated use of language in a moment of profound tragedy reveal about the real responsibilities of leaders when faced with disaster?
Yeah, it really forces you to ask that fundamental question, doesn't it?
Sure.
In those absolute crucible moments, is a leader's highest duty always to the cold, hard, objective facts of the present situation, however dangerous they might be? Or is it sometimes, perhaps, to the survival, the cohesion, the potential future of the society they lead?
It's not an easy question.
Not at all. But the answer, or at least the answer RFK seemed to embody that night in Indianapolis, might lie in that careful, measured deployment of words. Words designed specifically to inspire a future that maybe doesn't quite exist yet, but desperately needs to.
A really profound thought to carry with you. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into what was truly one of the most defining and certainly one of the most linguistically crucial moments in modern American history. If you enjoyed this exploration, really getting into the nuts and bolts of how powerful texts like this work under pressure, please do us a favor. Like this discussion, share it with someone who might find it interesting, and definitely subscribe to the channel, Book on a Shelf. Stay tuned for our next deep dive. We'll see you then.